What is up, everyone? Justin Parnell here, and today's deck tech is Izzet Aggro in Gladiator. And if you want to learn more about Gladiator on Magic Arena, check out my Intro to Gladiator video. But before we start slinging spells, help the channel out by taking a second to like and subscribe to keep seeing this sweet, sweet content every week. So let's get like Barry White, because we literally will not let our opponent get enough of our love. And by love, of course, I mean burn spells. So I want to cover three things. What cards the deck wants, how does this deck want to win, and what cards are critical to the success of this deck. So then what exactly is in this deck? What categories of cards does this deck want? At its heart, this is a deck that wants to gain an advantage from casting instants and sorceries while you have a permanent on the battlefield that cares about them. Some of those are creatures that will increase their power and or toughness when you cast them, like Sprite Dragon, Monastery Swiftspear, Frenzied Geist Blaster, Balmor, Battle Mage Captain, and Electrostatic Infantry. Most of those creatures want to get into the red zone themselves, but there's a few that are happy to sit back and accrue advantage from those spells in other ways. We have some token makers in Third Path Iconoclast, Poppet Stitcher, and Young Pyromancer. And Smothering Egg will eventually turn into Ashmouth Dragon, where it will hand out free shocks like all those terrible orange and black candies from an old lady's house at Halloween, which is to say, happily. And then there's other creatures that don't even need to be around when you cast the spell the first time. They just want to be sure that that card got into your graveyard in some other way. So these will still get some love if spells get in your graveyard any other way too, so feel free to play Dragon's Rage Channeler, Grim Lavamancer, Iomon, Trickster Friend, Terramander, and Dreadhorde Arcanist after some of the other creatures that want the spells cast when they can watch up close. And even though it's not a creature, the lone artifact in the deck is Runechanter's Pike, which loves a stocked graveyard. We've talked a lot about the spells, but I know I've only shown you creatures so far. But don't worry, this deck is equal part creatures and instant/sorceries as well. There are essentially three groups of spells, with draw spells like Expressive Iteration, Seek New Knowledge, Brainstorm, Opt, and Consider being the first group. The second group consists of counterspells, including Spell Pierce, Negate, Memory Lapse, Unsubstantiate, and Counterspell itself. The third and largest group is a bunch of burn spells. They come at both instant and sorcery speed and are fairly redundant in ability, but some of the better ones are Molten Impact, Royal Eruption, and of course, Lightning Bolt. And then finally, there's some spells that need you to finesse a certain creature type, but that shouldn't be too hard to accomplish. Both Wizard's Lightning and Wizard's Retort round out the two aforementioned groups from before, and you just need to control one of your 14 wizards to play them for the reduced cost. And of course, we have one last permanent type that is critical to accruing long-term card advantage. There are only 3 Planeswalkers in the deck, but they're all very powerful near the top of our curve. Chandra, Torch of Defiance, Jaya, Fiery Negotiator, and the Royal Scions all make a huge impact on the game, especially when our opponents are focused on stopping our plan A of cheap creatures and spells. So, the deck looks pretty solid, but what are the best ways to win? You generally want to be doing things to make sure you can get the most out of all of your cards. So that means casting Expressive Iteration before you make a land drop, making sure you play your creatures before the spells that give them a bonus, and waiting until you can access the cost-reduced versions of cards like the Wizard spells and Skewer the Critics. Little bits of damage definitely add up. Something you'll notice about the cards that want to be on the battlefield when spells are cast is that they're almost all 2 mana. This means pretty much every game, your turn 2 play should be one of these without fail. The cards that benefit from spells are better to get down before the cards that don't, even if it potentially subjects them to removal. The upside is simply too great, and we want to be the one asking the questions and making our opponents have the answers. But this of course means our 1 mana plays are very light as it comes to threats. so you won't always have one, and that's okay. You generally don't need to mulligan to find one or anything. Most of the spells cost 2, so just make sure you can start casting 2 spells a turn from turn 3 onward. The thing I like most about Izzet Aggro is it's an aggressive deck that's positioned great against other aggressive decks. You're normally going to be the one to be the aggressor in most matchups, but you can get a lot of damage done by having a single creature down and casting burn spells while your single creature or 2 benefits from the triggers. Few decks have as much cheap removal as we do. And while we don't have many Planeswalkers, that's really okay. They do provide a great advantage if they stick around for more than a turn, but there's a reason we only have 3. They're expensive and a little bit slower, so don't feel the need to craft your entire game plan around them. In this deck, I feel they're often best as one of the later plays rather than earlier. They don't generally need to be protected either, as the ability they provide are just more recursive abilities that appear on other creatures in the deck. So what cards can you not do without when playing this deck? What are the must-craft cards with your wild cards? The first and most important thing that we need to craft for this deck is the mana base. There's 6, exactly 6 lands on Arena that produce both red and blue mana and come into play untapped. With a curve this low, we cannot sacrifice speed for anything. For the most part, the instants and sorceries in this deck are pretty interchangeable. You need a bit of card draw, a bit of counters, a bit of burn, but the most important thing to remember is all of those cards have to cost either 1 or 2 mana. No exceptions. This deck is about velocity, so keeping the curve as low as possible is critical to its success. And one last note about this deck. There's a fine line, and really a balance that needs to be struck, between knowing when you need to press to go all in on a single turn, and knowing when you need to save some resources for the next turn. That's the reason that there are so few prowess creatures in this deck, and that there's not a card like Kiln Fiend, because ultimately you can put a lot of resources into those cards and a single removal spell can blow you out and take all that away. Having too many of those cards encourages you to press a little bit more often than is necessary, and I think the deck plays better when you don't do that as much. Izzet Aggro is one of my favorite aggressive decks in Gladiator, and hopefully now it's one of yours as well. Thank you all so much for your support and making it to the end of the video. Make sure to follow me on social media right here, and of course, like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any Gladiator content, Commander content, or more. And if you're interested in finding out more about Gladiator, check out the rest of the deck text in the Gladiator playlist. Thank you all for watching. I'm Justin Parnell, and we'll see you next time. Grim Lavamancer, can't get enough of your burn, baby.